spring water, is it out there? Spring water.
You've got to think lots of
All right.
and I don't think that's what they do. It just doesn't
Let's get started. And I'd like to welcome you all again to Magpie House. A lot of you are repeats, and there's quite a few new faces, from what I can see. That's as usual. Turn off your mobile phones for obvious reasons. Now, we've nurtured these forums for several years now, and so I'd like to say to you, Darryl, welcome. Welcome home. I'm going to put it that way tonight. And the reason for that is, let's consider your work a spiritual endeavour where we're elevating our values towards unconditional love. Why would it be any lower? Right? After all, if you listen to the radio show, Darryl refers to those in authority not as bastards or mongrels, which we see everywhere, but as MUPPETS. You heard that? Okay. And to me that's an endearing term to say, I forgive you, but stop it. Right? For you know not what you do. I've quoted many times that governments corrupt to the core are only corrupt because we, the collective, are also corrupt. We can't blame them because we put them there. Now, the best description I've got relevant to that is, I'm just going to read it out, and it comes from this book, Abduction to the Ninth Planet. It's also known as the Uber Prophecy, and some of us have read this, and we know that it's a phenomenal book. It's one of the most phenomenal books of our time. Would you agree?
I love it.
Yeah, come on. The people that have read it say sure. Yeah, okay. Anyway, this is what it says. Technology is nothing compared with true knowledge. Harmful by itself because it is material, not spiritual. Technology should assist, not confine people within a materialistic world, as is happening now on your planet. And that could be a reference to artificial intelligence and 5G and all the other stuff that's going on. Your people are obsessed with a single goal, affluence and the pursuit of wealth, with hatred of those richer and contempt of those poorer, pushing civilization closer toward moral and spiritual catastrophe. The greatest danger concerns materialism, seeking money as a means of attaining power, or a means to acquire drugs. I didn't write this, by the way. Or multiply possessions. Others turn to drugs in an endeavour to procure an artificial paradise. I won't read the rest of that. More spiritually advanced you become, the more you will benefit. The way to procure food is much easier, simplifying the process of organising life for more effective spiritual development. Planet Earth could be likened to a kindergarten, teaching basic social values. Now, if you're an activist, you simply must watch this movie doco series. Has anybody seen this? AD Kingdom and Empire? Yeah. It's the most spellbinding documentary series movie I've ever watched, and it's about Jerusalem under the control of Rome after the crucifixion, after the resurrection. And it describes that if you slay the monster, it grows another head and bites twice as hard. Rome was in charge of Jerusalem then, and it appears that, from what I can tell, Rome is still in charge today. Nothing's changed. And I'm planning to screen that next year. Right? My question is, does this explain why the local government class action hasn't happened? Right? After so many years? Yet some of us, like myself, are tackling this on our own. Next Friday, 7 to 7:30 p.m, I'll be presenting some alternatives to slaying the monster, to make it redundant, that I've used in many ways. Some of you are aware of my correspondence bundle. It's about that thick, that I've run with the council, where I've disarmed their legal team twice in 3 years. In fact, they were trying to get me to go and get legal advice, and in the end I just told them, you go and get legal advice because you don't know what you're talking about. Right? That was post-flood in 2016. It cost us about 10 years worth of rates, and we don't have great revenues here, and they haven't dealt with the issue. For my own protection and more, I'm actually thinking of publishing the bundle as a book. And there's some pretty juicy information in there. Yeah. In 2 weeks, we've got Thomas and friends representing foundation law as a means to going into peace, not creating controversy, as a very powerful and potent tool towards an awakening of humanity. Where's Thomas?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. Now, we also show cinema pretty much every Saturday. Tomorrow we've scheduled Masonic Legends, but this was pretty boring. We played some of it last week, and so I'm going to suggest we screen a new documentary, which I saw just yesterday, or I saw the link, and it looks pretty good. It's Treason of the Fake Australia Act 1986. So if anybody's interested, come along tomorrow night. Any interest? Yeah. One, maybe. Okay, it's the only chance I get to see my own movies, the ones I play. And then the following 2 weeks we're going to focus on soil. Note that carbon is not a pollutant and need not be taxed. That's another huge topic which we won't go into. But the loss of topsoil is extremely dangerous for humanity. Corporate farmers are forcing the soil to produce, further killing it with fertilisers and killing it and us even more. Hence why the big city agenda 2130 also needs to be stopped. So finally, please consider attending our end of season party, which is the 7th of December. We've got a potent combination of Indian sitar and Greek bouzouki. We'd be very grateful for your attendance. It's in the late afternoon, and we're following with a yoga movie, Breath of the Gods. Now, if vaccinations come up tonight, I might show you a little bit of this document. It's an incredible document I only received today. So, over to you, Darryl. So thank you very much.
Thank you, George. All right. So, who's here for the first time? Okay. Well, for the benefit of those who are here for the first time, my studies for the last 20 years have been based around the Australian Constitution and the standing of the Australian government in Australia and over the society and people described in that Constitution. I come from a background previous to that as a plumber, and I still am a plumber today. That's how I pay my bills. But the Australian Constitution has been abused probably more so in this country in comparison to the US and the abuse of the Constitution over there. Australia is in dire straits. We need the people, who are the supreme, absolute, uncontrollable authority, to take up their role and start waking up and start exercising that knowledge in the correct manner. And it doesn't mean throwing spears at those who are in government. It just means taking up action with a pen and applying that accordingly. So, who here owns property? People? Okay. Property is something that they're starting to attack now. They'll look for any excuse possible to try and take that property away, be it for defaulting on rates payments, or they have, and I'm in court on Monday helping somebody who has been disputing costs that they've been adding to rate notices without explanation.
Yeah.
And this is happening more and more around Australia. So they've taken away the paper trail of certificates of title relating to property ownership and land ownership, and it's more now online. And they've taken away a specific word in that title, which means you don't have the full rights that the Crown granted you through the freehold ownership of that property. So it's they are slowly clawing away at all of the rights, and I use that word loosely, that the Constitution granted. So what do you think the Constitution actually means to those in government and to you, to those people who are here for the first time? Yeah.
It means nothing to the government. They just run ramshot over you and your rights.
Right. So the Constitution is predominantly there to allow you to understand what government can and cannot do. Okay? That's the guideline for you. The Constitution has granted you as the supreme, uncontrollable authority. And that's in the preamble. Right? So the people created the states, they converted the colonies into states, and then you've inherited this government structure, of which is made up of the executive, parliament and court system. Now when we fight the system in court, or we dispute whatever government says or whatever parliament says, then we do that under federal jurisdiction. And tonight we're going to cover jurisdiction. Okay? Jurisdiction is very important because when we confront the system in any way, shape or form, then they expect us to communicate to them at a particular level. And when we communicate with the system, we either do it through our elected member, be it federal or state, be it lower house or upper house. And we communicate to them expressing our will. If that doesn't work, we can take an avenue through the court system. And we need to understand what that court system is made up of and what the restrictions are within that court system. So who at the moment is exposed to the court system? Okay. All right. Well, what we cover tonight will be very important because our court system at the moment is 100% broken.
110.
it is 100% broken. Can we pull up the internet at all, please? I'll just show you, give you a perfect example of what's happened. So if we go to Austlii, and we all know of Austlii, the Legal Documents website. Okay, good. We'll go to Austlii.
You want to go to Austlii?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Go to Classic Austlii.
While it's loading, Darryl, why isn't Jade a better search?
Oh, for the purpose of this,
Okay.
we'll just click Commonwealth in the top left-hand corner there, no, the other side. Over, yep, Commonwealth. Click that. Scroll down to Consolidated Acts. There, no, I just missed it. And under Commonwealth legislation. There you go, Commonwealth Acts. Yep. Go to P. And scroll down to, keep going, public, there we go, public governance, the Accountability Act 2013, that's it. And go to section 10. That's it. Yeah, can we all see that? Have a look at the last line.
Read it out.
Right. Now this is to do with Commonwealth entities. So what is a Commonwealth entity? We go to subsection 2. However, the High Court and the Future Fund Board of Guardians are not Commonwealth entities. Now that Future Fund Board of Guardians is headed by Peter Costello. Right, that's the corporate arm. The High Court of Australia is not a Commonwealth entity. Now, for those who have read the Constitution, when you look at the chapter that's devoted to the courts and explaining where the parameters of the courts are, section 71 clearly prescribes which is the first section to chapter 3, clearly prescribes what the High Court is. It's originally a federal Supreme Court to be called the High Court of Australia. So here we have in 2013, we no longer have a High Court as prescribed. If the High Court cannot exercise its powers under Chapter 3 of the Constitution, then so too that follows right through to every court in the land.
Doesn't that make that act void though? The fact that it contradicts the...
It's not a matter of whether it's void or not. It's a matter of this is what they recognise today. Okay? So all we need to do is understand by first looking at Chapter 3 of the Constitution, which prescribes what a court is and what to expect from a court. And then we look at legislation that's been passed since 1900 and we see problems like this. This is 2013. This was created. This Public Governance and Accountability Act is what they've put up as a remedy when you're dealing with government. at any level. So if you've got a problem with government at any level, then you've got to go to this Act and don't go through the court system. Okay, there is a path, and it's called set off. So you're able to set off any controversy that statute law that's been created by the corporate government since 1973. There is a way of setting off that obligation. And it's telling you here, don't go to the courts. It's not a Commonwealth entity. All right? And if you are confronted by a court order, if a court order has been brought out against you, the question you would raise back to whoever raised that order is, was this order, or is this order within the Coram Judicial? So we heard that term. Right? C-O-R-A-M, Judis, J-U-D-I-C-E. That's a proper court order from a judge in a proper court. Now, they've displayed here quite clearly, if the High Court's not a Commonwealth entity, what is it? Well, it's got an ABN. It's a company. It's no different to McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken. Right? And so too, this flows right through every court in Australia, down to VCAT, down to these tribunals. None of these entities can bring about a proper court order. So therefore, under the law of the land, whatever they bring out, has that got authority?
No.
Of course not. That's right. It has no authority, but those who take on those orders, like the sheriff or debt collectors, they don't know any better. So they just see the letterhead, Federal Court of Australia or Magistrates Court or whatever, and...
I found the ABN for High Court.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually got shareholders. So they create these orders, and the minions then, the MUPPETS, go out there and enforce those orders. Now, they don't know any better, because they've never heard this term Coram Judice. They wouldn't know what a proper judge's certificate looks like. And the devil is always in the detail. When you look at these alleged orders, and as I've been seeing a lot, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, court orders signed off by the judge's assistant. There's not even the name of the judge anywhere on this so-called piece of paper that's supposedly bringing about an order.
And not properly stamped either.
Yeah, they're stamped, but and there's a bit of a scroll there, but when you look at the requirements for a judge's certificate, it's clearly got to have the judge's name, clearly got to have their signature and their authority and the stamp with the crown on it. Okay, it's got to fulfil certain parameters, and none of these orders are fulfilling these parameters. They're all coming out of a corporation. And this is a clear breach of the law of the land. And they're doing this because none of us know this stuff. We're losing properties because of this.
So these are very quite simple things to look for.
Very.
And the question you would ask any alleged authority is not complicated, right?
Yeah.
So what I want to ask is, what's the question for us commoners to engage this with an
Today-
authority, because they're going to try and head fuck you.
Yeah. Today there was a lady in the Sydney tribunal, and she raised the question twice in front of a tribunal member. And once the ruling had come down, is the order that's going to come out of this tribunal, is that a Coram Non Judice order? And there was just silence. You know you've got them.
Sorry, what did she say? A Coram
Judice. It's Judice. So when I'm saying that, I'm saying Judice. That's how I say it. Coram Judice. So tonight, this is a Coram. Okay? It's just a gathering. Coram Judice is a gathering inside a court with a judge, a properly constituted judge, and a judge that is constituted under the law of the land. And there's also Coram Non Judice, which is a gathering with someone pretending to operate a court. And they bring out a pretend order with pretend authority.
Which wouldn't be
The English
legally
law has
enforceable.
been dealing with this for hundreds of years. And unfortunately, we haven't got precedents here in Australia through our court system to deal with this. We're a young country with respect to our jurisdiction, our common law. We've inherited the common law of England, but we've also inherited the US Supreme Court precedences. Right? So you can go back and use as a precedence here in Australia and throw it back at those who are pretending to operate our courts, but more particularly to our Parliament and to the Executive. You can throw back US Supreme Court precedents. And the beauty of US Supreme Court precedents, as you'll see tonight, is I'll bring up some cases in the US Supreme Court where, in fact, when you're confronted with a Coram Non Judice hearing that's brought about a pretend order, then whoever has signed that off, or whoever was standing at that hearing, is now liable to be sued through their public liability.
Yes.
Right? And you don't need to go near a courtroom. But the only way to deal with this is to then start to navigate the Personal Property Security Register, the PPSR. Right? And you set up a page on the PPSR, and then you'll find within the parameters of the Personal Property Security Register is what's called a negotiable instrument. And you then start negotiating with the party that has done wrong or has damaged the estate, okay, through the court order or the pretend order. And that's when you start noticing these people, and you put a formal notice to them. Now, with the PPSR, once you've established your page, it's best then to liaise with the registrar of the Personal Property Security Register with respect to uploading any correspondence in PDF format. Right? And they then provide a link that you send to whomever you're corresponding or trying to establish a negotiation. Now, when they acquiesce, when they fail to respond within the time that you've prescribed, so you put a limit of, say, 14 days onto the first notice, and if they fail to respond, they've acquiesced. They've accepted that they're in the wrong, And therefore, then you've got a record, and you also place that into your notice, so that if you don't respond within 14 or 28 days or whatever you require, then it will be taken that you've accepted that you are at fault, and as such, my next step is to apply a claim against public liability.
Sorry, just to interrupt there for a second. How do you enforce that? This is a burning question in my mind. Once you've established those things, they've acquiesced.
Yeah, then you go to the insurance and put a claim in.
Yeah, but who's going to enforce that? We've got the same people.
Well, you don't need to enforce it. Because what you've done, you've established, this is why you're going to the PPSR, right? It's on the public record. That's all you need to do. Once the insurance company sees that this is on the public record, they will then just start to negotiate. We've already done this, okay? We've done it. So it works, and then you go back and you, and this is where you need to get your heads around the Crimes Act 1914, Commonwealth, and it's specifically sections 4B and 4K. And essentially, you then start conducting the court case that you, or the negotiation on paper, and you can prescribe a penalty. So, for instance, in the case of a tribunal member or an alleged judge or an alleged magistrate, they've essentially attempted to pervert the course of justice, right, by bringing about a false court order. So it's Coram Non Judice. So there's a penalty for that. And that's prescribed in section 43 of the Crimes Act. Right? So that's 10 years in prison. Right? So you then liquidate that through the formula given to you in section 4B and 4K of the Act. And they update it virtually every 8 to 10 months. So they'll just to keep it up with CPI. Right? But the last time I applied this, it worked out to $330,000 for a breach of section 43. So then you're applying that as your remedy to the insurance company. And then they'll get back to you with we'll offer you some ridiculous amount, $5,000. No. We'll look at, let's say, $300,000. And you go into negotiation. But they've admit liability because there's a record. There's a public record. And this is what the courts are supposed to be. The original common law courts were a form of record for the general public. Right? And now it's all online. And we're still thinking, we've got to go in and verbally argue our points or our grievances or try and defend or prosecute in their courts. They don't want that. They want you to deal with all of this digitally. Okay? This is the corporate world. They've structured. And because we've lost our courts, we've got no other avenue until we get our courts back. And we won't do that while there's only a handful of people in here. Right? It's only when thousands, tens of thousands of people wake up and go, something's wrong, yeah, well it is. What do we do about it? And this is what we do. So we deal with them in a corporate manner, because this is a corporate world. Whether we like it or not, it is corporate. And this is what the Roman Curia has given to us.
Sorry, Roman which?
Curia.
Curia.
Curia. That's also known as the Holy See.
Holy See. What is Holy See?
It's the deception of the Vatican. It's the Vatican Empire, and that's how they operate. So if you want to
C is in
SWE,
SWE.
yeah, through the single
You mean
line.
the Illuminati eye at the top of the pyramid?
Yeah, that's
That
it,
one?
yeah.
There's nothing holy about the Vatican anyway.
That's right.
Well, it's quite the opposite.
That's not what Mr. Pell says.
Not what Mr. Pell says.
I'll kick his ass.
Got holes all over it.
He's into that. I'll find another way.
Brian, can I just ask a quick question? I was just looking at the annual report of the Family Court Australia, 17, 18, 18, 19. That's their financials, of course, and they've made a declaration in a letter to transmittal, which appears at the front of the document, that says that they are not a corporation. And that's the act that they've referred to as an act, I think it's 2016, you might have seen this, where they're saying they're an organisation but they're not a corporation. And it's got something to do with all the amalgamation that's going on between the federal circuit and the family court.
They're all panicking.
Yeah, are they?
Oh, they're panicking. When I raised this in front of the President of the Federal Court in 2009, I think it was, he was beside himself. His excuse was, well, the ABN number is purely for the purchase of stationery goods for the running of the court. I said, no, it's a lot deeper than that, actually. There's no constitutional permission to incorporate in any way, shape or form. The administration side of the courts all funded through consolidated revenue, and as such they are purely administration of a properly created court. He quit about 2 weeks after.
Really? So he couldn't
He realised that there was that incorporated, and the federal court and the family court are not recognised under the Constitution.
He quit.
Because they,
Why did he quit?
Well,
He was going to
not
get
happy.
sued.
He was not happy with ASIC. He was not happy with the whole system. This is Finkelstein.
they do own Ausscript, for example, which produces all the transcripts. That's directly owned by the institute known as the Commonwealth Australia.
It's
And
Liberty
own
Australia.
the trademarks and, all that stuff. So you sort of look at it and go, well, how can you say you're not a corporation?
Oh,
And then I think, well, what, you just declare it and it is so. Is that what they're doing? I mean, to make a declaration that in some way that...
the simplest way to deal with the courts is, like I said, can you show me that your order is Coram Judis?
That's the question.
That's it.
I had a judge say, what's that?
What does that do though?
I had to explain it to her. And she went into a 4-minute explanation of why the Victorian Constitution gave her validity to run a court. I said, right, okay.
You know, I was arguing Victorian Constitution many years ago. And when that was put to me, I said, oh, which one? Because there are two here in Victoria.
Sorry, there are two what?
Two constitutions.
Oh, yeah.
Operating concurrently together
Yeah,
as we speak.
as we speak. So they couldn't deal with it. They could not deal with it because it's on their own record.
And so what are those two?
Okay, the first constitution for Victoria was created in 1855. And it was properly named and passed by Westminster. The first attempt was in 1854, and that was drafted by the Parliament of Victoria, and that was submitted to Westminster, and they just laughed at it, threw it out, and recreated it and brought it out as the 1855 Constitution. And the 1855 Constitution ran quite comfortably up until 1975. And in 1975, they thought, okay, how are we going to bring about a corporate constitution? So they then looked back in the archives and they went, oh wow, there was a Victorian Constitution created in 1854. I don't know, we'll repeal that. Because it hadn't been essentially officially repealed by Westminster. So they repealed it in the 1975 Constitution. And they said, well, now that's been repealed, now we're going to create the 1975 Constitution. Of course, they didn't mention the 1855 Constitution. Right? So it was all just smoke and mirrors. And that's the basis of the Constitution today. And that's when I raised it in the Ringwood Magistrates Court. Just beside themselves. There's no idea what it is.
Darryl, what's the definition of repeal?
It's gone. To a certain extent.
So they just deleted it?
They deleted it. So you have the two powers of Parliament are to amend any section of law that's been created or repeal. Right? So amend means add words or replace words. Repeal means remove it altogether.
Actually,
From that date on.
actually, amendment means an improvement too.
Well, it can be an
It has to
improvement.
improve it. It has to can't distract from the actual original act.
So the word improve means no prove?
But if there's been a piece of law or a piece of legislation that's been repealed, for instance, let's just focus on the word repeal, you can bring it back. Okay?
If it hasn't been repealed. No.
Now, if it has been repealed, you can bring it back.
How's that
And you
work?
use the magic words as of right.
So who has the right to bring it back?
Anyone. The people are the supreme, absolute, uncontrollable authority. Okay? And this comes through section 7 of what's called the Acts Interpretation Act 1901 Commonwealth. So when they created the Constitution, they brought out the following year an act called the Acts Interpretation Act 1901. And that's to help those who read the Constitution to better understand it. Okay? And it's vital. It is a vital piece of legislation. When you read that Constitution, you must have, if you're fair income about understanding that Constitution, you must have a copy of that Acts Interpretation Act 1901 beside you. Okay? Otherwise you're kidding yourself. For instance, sections 15A of that Acts Interpretation Act clearly says every act is subject to the Constitution. Right? Every act. So this is a direct instruction to the legislator. So they are clearly, through the Constitution and the Acts Interpretation Act, they are clearly within a boundary with very high walls. They cannot climb and run off. There's no gateway to run off. Okay? The horse can't bolt out of that one. And what they've done, they've set up a mirror image of that Constitution and the laws of Australia. And they've been getting everyone to concentrate on the mirror image. And that's called the colour of law.
Is that both state and federal?
Yeah. And there's another trick. Good point. There's another trick they've been playing on us. Oh, this is a state court. Have we heard that? Oh, this is state jurisdiction. We've heard those terms. No. Sorry. there's one jurisdiction, and that's federal. So that state court is a federal court by definition. All right? These terms that we're used to hearing, they're coming from the legal profession. The legal profession are the problem.
It's a society.
They have been orchestrating this deception for a long time. I mean, the whole deal with the legal profession is another whole lecture on itself. But that when they get into these courts, they've tried to, and they've done it fairly successfully, they have separated the state from the Commonwealth. And that's not what the Constitution has granted them to do. When you look at the preamble to the Constitution, it says, whereas the people of Victoria, New South Wales, these defined colonies, that's the Commonwealth. So Victoria is the Commonwealth. New South Wales is the Commonwealth. You go to a Victorian court, you're in federal jurisdiction. Don't let them tell you otherwise. If they say, oh, we're in state jurisdiction, well, please define that. I'm all ears.
So there can't be any inconsistency, can there? That's what the point you're making.
Well, there's no consistencies at the moment, no. There's nothing but inconsistencies. Their behaviour has been totally inconsistent with the law of the land.
Although they are consistently deceptive.
Yeah, they're consistently deceiving us. So now we'll have a look at the US Supreme Court cases that we can fall back on with respect to jurisdiction. And the word jurisdiction is very important because it defines via subject matter where you are. Okay, so if it's a claim, a corporate claim, or a tort claim where there's been damage, then they can work within that jurisdiction, but overriding that the whole time, you're in Crown federal jurisdiction. So federal jurisdiction can entail equity, it can entail criminal, civil, and the finer points relating specifically to the subject matter. But if we go to George, if we can pull up that jurisdiction.
Where does the Commonwealth and the US law intersect?
When you read the annotation to the Commonwealth Constitution, the quick and Darryl, you'll find in the very first beginning pages to that document a whole bunch of US Supreme Court cases. And specifically they allowed this because Australia is a young common law country. So we needed precedent that had not been established in the courts to fall back on. So
why didn't England have them?
In English, and we also inherit the English because when they drafted our Commonwealth Constitution, they actually used the US Constitution as an example. They used German law, they used Swiss law, they used English law. So our Constitution is very unique in the world. Right. And for that reason, we've got an incredible piece of law that is being abused at the moment. And the only reason it's being abused is because that law empowered you over and above government. Very important. I mean, they don't have this power in England. They don't have this power in Canada. They don't have this power in the US. that we enjoy here, and yet
And we're not using it.
and we're not using it. And we're in deep trouble. Here we are. And there's only a handful of you here. You know, I've been doing this 20 years and just going, oh.
But it is full.
Yeah, true. But
We'll have to
But the
book
restaurant
town
just down the
hall
road's
and
full as well.
it is, isn't it? Yeah, and
And
when
some of the
it's,
pubs.
and when the footy season's on, tens of thousands go and watch a bunch of grown men chase a bit of leather around a football field.
That's breed and circuses, what's changed?
Oh,
Let's go down there and hand out flyers.
no. Terrific. And most of them will just go, well, yeah, but I'm more interested in,
Get me my beer.
yeah, everything's
So I'm
fine.
not watching.
Someone's got to be, you've got to be compelled through hardship. Something's got to motivate you.
And this is, the best thing that's happening now is the system's biting people. My phone's busy. I'm helping people all over Australia. But it's, in one sense, it's not busy enough. You know, I want to see queues of people going to the court register, challenging their parking fine, their speeding fine, their rates notice, whatever. That's when the system will then go, oops, well, game's up. Game's up.
You mean I won't have to pay me toll fines and things like that?
Yeah, all those things.
Oh, well, that's, I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah. But we have to get our head around it. So either we accept what the system's done and we just take advantage of the corporate world they've created and we sit back and we just let it happen, or do we uphold the law of the land? The choice is yours.
What's the purpose, Brian, of setting up this mirrored thing? What's in it for them? What's in it for Costello and the Guardian and all that stuff? Yeah, is it just
Oh, I think it's just greed and
power?
power. Yeah. It's basically the weaknesses of species. Only those people can answer those questions.
You know, it's all in the scripture, just the sins, the psychological defects, and greed's one of the biggies. Use power,
All these things. They all like it. So, we come to the first case. The law of Congress do not extend into territorial limits of the states, but only have force in the District of Columbia. Now, in the corporate world that we're in, where Australia is in the District of Columbia, right? We only have to go as far as the registration of the Commonwealth of Australia as a corporation in the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington. Right, so that's your indication that as such, because Australia is within that district, then again this is well and truly within the jurisdiction, these cases. And other places that are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government. So where a court failed to observe safeguards, it amounts to a denial of due process. And where do you get your due process?
Constitution.
That's right. Court is deprived of juris. I've got it. Okay? It's deprived. It's an automatic. Okay? If they cannot establish their jurisdiction, then there is none. And the focus then comes back to those who are exercising this pretend jurisdiction. Okay? And then this is where the PPSR stuff comes in and your ability to put them on notice. Right? Rather than go to their grubby courtrooms. So not every action by a judge is an exercise of his judicial function. Okay. It is not a judicial function for a judge to commit an intentional tort, even though the tort occurs in the courthouse. When a judge acts as a trespasser of the law, when the judge does not follow the law, the judge loses subject matter jurisdiction. Okay, and the judge's orders are void of no legal effect.
What's a tort?
Or damage.
That's a common law offence.
Damage to a party, to property.
I think I've got 35 cops running the other way from me at the moment.
So this is, and these sort of precedences need to be put in front of the police, need to be put in front of the sheriffs. The evidence that we have, and the evidence you attain through acquiescence. So when you put the onus back to the court to show that it's a Coram Judice rule, and they can't provide that, then the obligation of the police and the sheriff, because they're the ones who have taken the oath to the creed, to the rule of law, well, they're left going, well, wow, what have we been doing? There's a separation. This is what we're seeking, this separation between the MUPPETS for the system and the system itself. That's when you will get change. Because those who are upholding these orders and enforcing these orders will go, well, they're not worth the paper they're written on.
Are they in the front? These are some cases in the front of the Constitution, are they, Darryl?
No, these are late. These are cases going back 1807 to recent. Right? So it doesn't matter. There's no, because we have an established strong precedent with respect to jurisdiction here in Australia through the courts, then we fall back on the US Supreme Court cases.
What's that case called?
Oh, it's the Yates versus Village of Hoffman Estates, Illinois. So defence of lack of jurisdiction over the subject matter may be raised at any time, even on appeal. So it doesn't matter. You could be just before the orders are passed, and then you can raise jurisdiction. Don't be afraid. I've personally been putting jurisdiction on all the paperwork I was putting out back in 2003. But first and foremost, in that first paragraph was the established jurisdiction, either as a prosecutor or what I expected in defence. Right? You always put your jurisdiction in. But if you don't, you can raise it.
What's putting your jurisdiction there? How do you set an example?
Well, for instance, I'm required, as a prosecutor, when I sued the Commonwealth back in 07, it was that this court's under Chapter 3, federal jurisdiction. And this matter is being brought in under Section 13 of the Crimes Act. Section 13 of the Crimes Act allows me to prosecute.
So you set the parameters based on quoting what you're using is relevant.
So my standing.
Yeah, your standing, got you.
Okay, because most of us think, well, gee, go to court to prosecute. No, that's the job of a police officer or a lawyer or a commission like ASIC or the ACCC or these barriers that the systems put up to stop any person from prosecuting.
The OPP didn't try and bar you?
Oh, the OPP is easy to do. You just throw Section 13 back.
Right.
What's Section 13?
That's any person can bring about a criminal charge against any person in Commonwealth jurisdiction. Section 15F is any person can raise a civil charge or claim.
What's that part of the Constitution?
That's the Crimes Act 1914, right? And that's an inherited law. Okay, so these through the wars of England.
Oh, that's an act.
Yeah.
It's not in the Constitution.
No, it's an act. And anything post 1973, it's got a big question mark over it here in Australia. We don't touch it. Right? Anything prior 1973, yeah, that's okay.
I mean, the Queen of Australia's not there.
referendum.
Yeah, but referendums only relate to the amendment or repeal of parts of the Constitution.
I'm hung up on the word, using the word person.
Yeah, but person's also inside the Constitution.
Yeah, I know that.
What's the definition of that, Rob?
A subject of the Queen.
And in reference to the Crown, as I'm aware, there's more than one Crown, isn't there?
No, there's only one.
Oh,
They've created
yeah,
a corporate creed, a mirror image.
So when these officers swear an oath, they think they're swearing to the Queen.
When you look at the oath, like today, you look at the Victoria Police oath, it's kosher. Yeah, it's to the Queen, to Queen Elizabeth II. And when you see the words Queen of Australia or Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of Australia, yeah, different animal. Okay. Now, you don't have to go far to see that the Queen of Australia is a corporation. And they admit to this. They actually admit quite openly that the Queen of Australia is a corporation.
They get a Google the ABN for that.
Oh, the ABN's on, they've even got one ABN called Queen Elizabeth II Assenting Powers. That's one company name. There's a whole bunch of them, but if you just go to Wikipedia, I mean, I don't give a lot of faith in Wikipedia, but if you just put Queen of Australia into Wikipedia, have a read, it will shock you. You know, they admit openly it's a corporation.
When you get an infringement notice, if you look at on the infringement notice, they always quote recent acts, much more recent than 1973. So if you're going to challenge any of those...
Oh, easy. Any infringement, say from Victoria, any infringement notice is issued from Victoria, it will come through Fines Victoria.
Yeah.
Right? So you always reply in the form of a notice. This is not a request for a review. First thing. This is a request for particulars relating to the authority that Fines Victoria are attempting to impose. Okay?
Say that again. Because it's a bit of an important sentence
Useful.
there.
Very useful, yeah.
They're trying to impose a particular jurisdiction, so you put them in the box. You say, okay, is Fine Victoria imposing a particular jurisdiction?
But it may be a council, it may be...
Doesn't matter. If it comes from Fines Victoria,
So what's
they're the
question
issuing
you
body.
ask? What do you ask?
So, is Fines Victoria a judicial authority, as defined in section 23 of the Magistrates Court Act?
Okay.
I heard that's why they got rid of city compliance, because too many people were waking up that had no jurisdiction.
Why can't I find the ABN for Fines Victoria? What's going on?
They probably don't have one.
They probably
It's
don't.
under DOJ.
Recently,
Hang on, what?
there was
Under the Department of Justice.
Who are these people speaking? What'd you say?
I think Fines Victoria they've scrapped because some of the fines have had police title symbol on it.
Oh, the Nazi symbol? Like that?
Yeah, the Victorian Nazi symbol.
Yeah.
It might now be under the
but section 23 of the Magistrates Court Act relates to extortion from people pretending to be judicial officers.
I've asked like a dozen jacks for their oath of office. I told them, you know, show it to me, and they can't, they won't. Well, we haven't got one. They don't even know what it is.
Yeah, well, that's
Well, they're playing dumb.
well, they are. But
They won't show it to me.
on the day that they leave the academy and they become a fully fledged servant of Her Majesty, they take the prescribed oath, and that is to Queen Elizabeth II. And that's a properly fledged servant of Her Majesty.
They don't have to remember it, it's not their job to remember the oath.
Yeah, they've taken that oath, and that's prescribed. You can actually download that. That's fairly open on public. It's on the public forums.
You know, my research was quite surprised that huge amounts of people have actually gone before me and researched it as well. It turns out to be quite a sticking point that the average muppet on the street level become acutely aware these police aren't actually serving me. I mean, even when they can't legally pontificate, they seem to get the concept that these actually are Nazis, they are papers, please, you know.
Yeah, well, they very quickly label us as sovereign citizens.
Yes, and we are.
Now, have a look
No,
at
we're
the
not. That's a
meaning,
tautology.
the meaning of sovereign citizen.
Two opposite meaning words.
Is it good?
No, no.
No.
They're
They changed the meaning.
They're the sovereign citizens. They've put up a mirror. They are the sovereign citizens. Why? Because they're operating off a law that doesn't exist. They're making up these laws and then trying to impose them on us. And the danger that the police officers and the sheriffs and the like are exposed to is they've taken an oath to the law of the land and to the executive through the law of the land, properly constituted law. And then they go out and they enforce pretend laws from pretend courts. So they're the sovereign citizens. And then they try and turn that on us and say, oh, you don't adhere to the law here in the state. Well, hang on. The Constitution very clearly instructs me not to. It says in section 109, when a law of the Commonwealth is inconsistent with the law of the state, the former is valid and the latter is to be treated as invalid.
To the extent of the inconsistency.
Yeah, to the extent of the inconsistency. So, you know, this is where they turn things around. They put this mirror up, continually put this mirror up. In order to overcome that, we come back at them with the question. Very simple. Is this order that you're relying upon, is this court order, Coram Judicial?
Is there a court order?
Where is it?
There might not even be.
Where's the warrant? Where's the order? Where's the order that created the warrant? They cannot bring these bits of paper up. And
Sorry, where is the order that's got
that created the warrant?
Okay.
So the police and the sheriff rely on warrants. And there must be a court order behind that warrant.
Even though it's not signed.
But again, where's the warrant? I want to see it. Because a set of eyes that knows the law of the land and has looked at the Constitution, they would then look at that warrant and go, well, hang on, where's the signature? Where's the indication that this has come through the Crown? Okay. And if it's not there, you ask questions. Well, why isn't this?
So what are you looking for? Because they do sign warrants from the court, from these so-called courts. What are you looking for specifically? What's going to be
I
the
haven't
way?
seen them yet.
wet ink, the seal.
No,
what are we looking for on the warrants that they'll have from the court, possibly from a court?
Well, it'll have a
given
stamp
away?
of a crown.
No. What won't it have, should I say?
What won't it have?
We're looking
Stamp
for.
Well, have a look at
What
any
gives it
warrant.
away as being fake? No wedding. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
there's
saying?
no wedding signature.
Darryl,
No
so-
wedding signature.
The wedding signature and a stamp clearly showing it's from the Crown Court.
Okay.
Sorry, Detective Ritchie does all the fines, remember? All the spending fines. I found in the court system there's this person called Warwick Snowden who does a lot of the orders. And it's never the judge. So, is that, what, can you know what just, is that really what we're talking about here? That there's no judge involved, really?
There's no judge.
Some fictitious, legal fiction.
Yeah,
I
that's,
assume it's a real person. but-
and you need to look at section 9 of the
Might not even be a
Judiciary.
real person.
Section 9 of the Judiciary Act actually puts a requirement that judges take a specified oath.
Yes.
It's a 1903 Judiciary Act.
A specified
Yes.
oath.
That's fine.
And that oath clearly ties that judge or justice straight back to the Queen. Why? Because the Queen is the chief justice of all of our courts. So they have to take an oath back to her. And what they've done in every state of Australia, in every court, they've changed that oath so that the judge is swearing an oath to the state or to the people. Okay, and they've twisted it. So that's not recognised. That's not a proper court judge. It's not a proper Crown appointed judge.
But how would you know that they've sworn a false oath?
Well, you pull it up out of their legislation. So, for instance, here in Victoria, let's have a look at the Magistrates Court Act. And you go to the Act, where in the schedule, it will have the oath. You go to each court, like the county court, have a look at in the schedule to all of these court pieces of legislation that the state parliaments create. And you will see a clear inconsistency between the state judge oath and what's required through the Commonwealth. Section 109 again. Any inconsistencies are clearly invalid.
Where do we find the police oath, the current one that's happening, the scam's going on now? Where do we find that?
Well, the police...
Because every time I tell them, show it to me, you give it to me, they won't give it to me.
well, Google's a fairly...
Your friend.
It's put in police oath, Victoria Police Oath.
Would it be worthwhile?
Could I search on DuckDuckGo, would it come up there?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah?
Yeah, that goes for it.
Yeah, Google's the enemy.
Yeah, I've found it before. I've read it.
It is, yeah. The coppers do this, they don't know any better. They're the muppets.
Would it be worthwhile mentioning at this point that one of the reasons that they're so desperate to get rid of the Commonwealth and bring in the Republic is so as we don't have the protections of the Constitution?
Absolutely. And this started in 1902.
Jeez, it didn't take long.
It didn't take long, yeah.
2 whole years we managed to get out of the law of the land before they started attacking it. And who were the first to start attacking it?
Lawyers.
No.
Oh, was it?
No. It was the public service.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the Commonwealth Franchise Act and the Commonwealth Public Service Act. Those two pieces of legislation, the Franchise Act whittled away the power of those in Parliament, and the Public Service Act gave a job for the boys in perpetuity, and if anyone in the public service misbehaved, they are not to be exposed to the public courts. They had their own internal commission, and that was the raising of the first Star Chamber since 1640 in the whole of the Commonwealth. Right here in Australia. Yep, Australia put their hands up in 1902
What do you mean they put their hands up?
and said, yep, we'll misbehave. We'll show you how to run a country and bluff everybody.
Right.
Boy, they've done pretty well. How far has it gone?
So are those acts, they're false acts, they're not legit?
Absolutely.
But
No
even
way.
though they're old.
They hounded, if you look at the history of those two pieces of legislation, they hounded the parliamentarians in the day to pass them. So they obviously got some dirt on them and got them to pass this through into legislation. But
the photographs.
it doesn't matter. You know, all these misbehaviours just disappear. They dissipate, and the law of the land will always prevail.
But what I'm, like, you're mentioning certain acts, and then there's the Constitution. So, you know, when you throw in a bunch of acts, that creates a hell of a lot of information you have to process. What's the deal with that? How can you clarify that for me? As someone who's a little bit confused.
Well, anything up to 1973, you can look at it quite comfortably with some security that there is constitutional traceability. Okay? That it's traceable back to that constitution.
Except those two you just mentioned.
But that was 1902, yeah, except for those two. But there's traceability. Doesn't mean that all that legislation up to 1973 is, you know, pristine. No. But after 1973, forget it. That was the corporation. That was the mirror image operating. Right. And you only have to see the legislation that started coming out after 1973. You know, all of a sudden the Family Law Court appeared. Then they created the Federal Court. Then they recreated the High Court. You know, so gradually over a decade or two, they've pretty much duplicated the whole system, and now they're running under a republic.
Even before 73, between 1900 and 1973, wouldn't there be other acts and all that rubbish that are not constitutional, that didn't come in with the referendum?
Yeah. Acts don't come in with referendums. No. Only the Constitution itself can be amended or repealed through a referendum.
Right. So when you hear about all these other, like, 1960s or whatever, where did they come from then?
Well, that's the power of the Parliament to pass a law.
Right.
But the Parliament's restricted by what the Constitution dictates.
Right.
Okay. Now, the Constitution tells you what Parliament can do, what the executive can do, and what the judiciary can do and can't do to a certain extent. But if you really want to go to what they most certainly cannot do, you've got to go to the Bill of Rights, 1688. And that was passed specifically to say whatever you do when you're in the executive arm of government in the Commonwealth, or you're in the Parliament of the Commonwealth, or you're working within the court system of the Commonwealth, you must keep away at all times from the Holy See.
Foreign power.
They've completely trashed that now. Perth Agreement, remember?
Yeah, but 2010, Australia's High Court, alleged High Court, full bench, said that the imperial laws are untouchable.
What?
Imperial laws are untouchable?
Absolutely untouchable here in Australia. No parliament can touch an imperial law.
As in can't change it.
Can't change it. Can't repeal it. Can't muck around with it. That was 2010.
So they're talking about the Constitution there, right?
Because it's a UK Act.
Well, it's a UK Act, but also the Imperial Acts Application Act 1980 and 1922.
Hang on, that's
Victoria.
Yeah. No, 1980, and that's when you look at the 1980 Act, Victoria. All they were doing, there was a bunch of people within the bureaucrats who were comfortably sleeping at night, but they were able to focus on specifically which laws of England are being breached by the current Parliament here in Victoria. And they put them all into this one piece of legislation. They condensed it down. And that's called the Imperial Acts Application Act 1980.
Victoria. Section 8,
It is
Section 12.
dynamite.
Yeah.
And in there they clearly laid out the petition of right and the Bill of Rights. And all the laws relating to justice and liberty, habeas corpus, freedom of election.
What does habeas corpus mean?
Bring me the body.
Right.
Okay. It's Latin for bring me the body.
Sorry, but you're saying it's the Roman Empire, not the British Empire?
Yeah, the Roman Empire is the enemy. That's the foreign. That's the Holy See.
Yeah.
And what is the Holy See? You mentioned that, and I was like, well, what's that?
It's the eye at the top of the pyramid.
Well, that's the power that's been there since the formation of the Roman. Well, no, the Roman Empire has been around for thousands of years, but it converted itself into the Vatican after 324.
I mean, in law, when we're dealing with law, what's the Holy See?
Your Vatican.
They're a foreign state. We've got an ambassador.
Maritime Admiralty scam, that one, right?
Yeah, but it's
When does it
essentially
become
the
relevant
Vatican.
to us? When
It's
does it
this,
become relevant? What's been brought to us that is of that?
the Bill of Rights. Okay, the Bill of Rights lays out specifically, if you understand, if you read the Bill of Rights, you will see in the Bill of Rights, it's an instruction to Parliament to keep away from any form of lawmaking. For instance, Section 12, that all grants and promises of fines and forfeitures to particular persons before a conviction is illegal and void. So that's telling the Parliament and the Executive very clearly, don't bring about a piece of legislation that allows anyone other than a court to impose a penalty or a forfeiture. So, when a police officer comes up and hands you a bit of paper saying you've just been given a $200 penalty, did they have the authority to do that?
No. Never.
Yeah, I'm still trying to see what the Holy See is talking about.
Well, the Holy See is where this sort of mindset comes from. And that's laid out in the Bill of Rights. This is what the Holy See will expect of you as a parliamentarian or as a member of the executive, and don't go past. So your job description, if you're in Parliament, your job description if you're the King or the Queen, is to understand that Bill of Rights. So that when you assent as the executive, when you assent to a piece of legislation, you make sure that that proposal doesn't breach the Bill of Rights, doesn't breach the Constitution.
And everything outside of that is considered, that's what you're calling the Holy See influence.
The Holy See influence is in that Bill of Rights. It says, don't do it.
That's what I'm
Don't
saying.
do what?
It's implied.
It's implied.
The Bill of Rights isn't the Holy See.
The Bill of Rights says in the oath, it has a prescribed oath right, and an allegiance for every member of government to take.
Well, a seat in office.
It's warning you against the...
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify.
But the Queen sworn fealty to the
Because
Pope,
it came
right?
out of
So,
Rome.
She can't.
Under the
Well, she
seasons
has.
of Rome back in the ancient
Well,
Rome.
officially?
yeah.
That's
She's
where
not
this
allowed
maritime
to.
admiralty bullshit started, and that's why it's all like...
No, but she,
Head of the Church of England.
that's right, but she's the head of the
The Lord
Knights
of the
of
High
Malta,
Seas, they call
and
it.
they sworn fealty to the Pope.
Yeah, but not as the Queen.
And effectively the all-seeing eye.
I think so.
Nothing holy
Her
about
father
it.
There's nothing holy about it, that's
Yeah.
right.
She couldn't have done other
Most
things.
financial-
I've never
And
seen that.
Yeah, merchant
That's why
slash merchant slash.
When you look at the Bill of Rights,
Yeah,
you'll
yeah.
very clearly see, and then use that as a comparison back to what they're doing today. You'll see a clear distinction and a clear
But
inconsistency.
she's been charged several times for breaching her vows anyway.
Yeah, but who by?
Lots of people, ordinary people.
Where have they made the charges?
Well, John Harris, I don't know because he's sort of quickly
A lot of
went
people say a
missing.
lot of things, but officially, no. Now the Queen or the King can do no wrong.
God might say something different to that.
No, this is the
He
law.
says he's going to judge everything.
The law prescribed through the Crown very clearly says the King or Queen can do no wrong.
But what about, you know, implications that she's into some really seedy, horrible stuff? Is it the fact that you know, she's been charged with stuff, but they've just got such good protection that nobody can get at some of these people?
Hang on, you're talking about the individual. I'm talking about the office.
Oh, okay.
That would undermine the office, though.
It's a symbol.
No, only if it
Representation.
directly imposed
Not
on
her herself.
the assenting powers that that office exercises. Now, what's happened, if you look at the history of the monarchy in England, you had kings and queens who were well and truly outside of their tenure, and it caused parliaments to then bring in laws to restrict the executive. And in the, I suppose the key case was King Charles I. And when he got into power after King James, he brought about, he was quite greedy and he wanted to, you know, he wanted his material wealth. And he imposed a compulsory tax on everyone in England called a tonnage and poundage tax. That was in 1629. And in order for that tax to be imposed, he got rid of the Parliament. He sacked a lot of them. He said, right, I'm running the show now. And that's what's called the 11-year tyranny that England went through. So from 1629 to 1641 or 1640, England was under tyranny through the imposition of this tax, and King Charles empowered sheriffs and bailiffs to collect that tax, and he raised star chambers for those who were found not to have been paying that tax, and essentially they were put in the dungeons and the like, and they suffered. And it was Oliver Cromwell and his boys that stepped up and said, no, you're abusing the Magna Carta, you're abusing the laws of England, and you're abusing hundreds of years of established law, laws of the forest, laws of Monument time. You were abusing all these laws. And he then assented to habeas corpus. Right? And that was the re-establishment of all of those laws. But then a civil war broke out in England. And that civil war ended in 1648 when King Charles lost his head. Why? Because he had an allegiance to the Pope and to Rome. Because this was where the instruction was coming from. Right? So this is important to understand. Then you had the Act of Settlement in 1700, after the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights was really a nail in the Holy See's coffin with respect to how they could exercise their power in England. And they slowly whittled away the power of the King or the Queen to the point where today we have a monarch that operates on advice from her ministers. All right? And that's where we are today. So no matter what the Queen is doing as an individual, it's separate. And this is why there's all of this stuff. We've got to really be careful with information that we see without personally knowing that this individual's been misbehaving. None of us know. We read this stuff on the internet or whatever. But as far as the office of the Queen is concerned, it is still there and it's still intact. And her ministers are the barrier that's been created. And we only have to see what's happening in England today in the Brexit. And that's crucial. It's causing an earthquake around the whole of human society, because we are all now looking at what's happening in England and we're saying, well, hang on. The people have very clearly instructed the Parliament to step out of the EU, and they're not doing that. So here we have people versus government. Gee, is that new? No. But it's happening, and it's having a massive effect around the world. And the only one that at the moment standing up is resistance to that corruption is Trump. Mm-hmm. Like him or not, he is resisting that corruption. So, and we've been testing the Queen and her office this year. And so far, she's accepting what we've put to her. So